Hey guys, it's Stephanie Siegel of Real Media Group, and I'm so excited for this new series, Ask a News Director. We have collaborated with the NAHJ this year, and we're kicking it off today with Teri Arvesu, who is the Vice President of Content at Univision Chicago, also a proud member of NAHJ. And thanks for being here. Let's just start with the many questions we're getting from young journalists who want to know what the beep to do. Graduation is around the corner, and many people are afraid that if they send out traditional reels in the traditional way that they will not get looked at because the state of the media is pretty uncertain right now. So what is your answer starting off with that?
I mean, I think I don't think that they will be seen differently because of traditional reels. Right. I don't think that's the issue. I want to address more the fact that clearly, I mean, let's just admit that they're very uncertain times, okay? Yeah. Just because I hold the title of news director doesn't mean that I'm privy to this information nobody else has, right? I've learned to say over the course of the last couple of weeks, I don't know, to some of my staff, which is not always the easiest thing to say, right? So I don't have a clear-cut answer, but what I do have is really, I think, and this is for students or anybody else going through this, is that we have a choice, which is whether we become paralyzed with fear or whether we become nimble enough to really to identify opportunities that might be out there and take advantage of them. And what I mean by that is, this is exactly what I was saying to this intern the other day was, in normal circumstances, you would have a gun to your head and you have to get a job.
Right.
Just like in our sales department, they would have a gun to their head and they have to make a sale with that client. Whereas we've experienced an incredible opportunity, which is that we can partner with our clients in a way without expecting anything back, right now. And I think that is conducive to great relationships that can happen. So there is power in not needing something back right now and simply allowing yourself to do the right thing or something that you're passionate about. So in these circumstances, and my advice for this student was, and I say this knowing that there's a place of maybe privilege, right? That financially we all have, but it's the reality. We have to operate in an as-is reality. That right now things are somewhat uncertain. But nowadays, unlike when I graduated, I didn't have a camera. I couldn't make a website. I couldn't respond to the needs of a community through this medium the way that many of these students can right now. And with everybody looking for answers and searching for them, or, and there being so many everybody has a different life experience, right? These young students that are graduating and coming into a field, if they have, I think, the empathy to really pick up on the needs that are in their community, and they go out there and they either, make sure you social distance, but use this as a chance to maybe create their own YouTube or website or something to speak directly to their own, who knows better than themselves what many of them are living, right? That there may be something, to that. I think we're going to see a lot of changes emerge from this. And, the people who are successful are the ones who either harness the opportunity and say, okay, look, I might not get a job right now. Yeah. Right. But what I can do is this, and I can go out there and do what I love doing, which is telling stories or serving a community, or helping people that can't get the answers, whatever that may be, and using that to drive sort of your passion. And hopefully maybe that will become, at one point, maybe that will become a career. Maybe that's the thing that helps you stand out. I always look at, for me, the people that stand out the most are the ones not waiting for permission to be given a job to start doing what they love.
Yeah, I agree.
You can do all this stuff yourself.
Yeah.
And two, the ones who have the enough empathy to be able to really connect and speak to and communicate to a sector of the audience that may be under communicated to. Mm-hmm. So it's sort of like there's a difference between opinion and point of view. I think having and finding your voice earlier in your career makes you very
couldn't agree more with that.
successful, right? So that's how I would approach, and I know it's scary, but that's where I myself am looking as a news director at what opportunities exist right now of how we're doing things that might last into the future, right? And I will tell you one thing that what journalists study right now, I wouldn't want to be in any other part of the company than where I am right now, because the sense of purpose that I have and that my staff has fueled us and kept us going. Being able to speak to people on the phone or direct message and seeing that you're giving them those answers. And I'm not sure that fuels everybody, but I think it fuels a lot of the people who are journalists and who chose this career. And I don't know that you need to have a title or a job to do that.
No,
because
I agree with you.
You learn the fundamentals in school, right? The questions to ask, the authorities to go to, and you know how to tell good stories. So, good stories can come from anywhere nowadays. We see that with social media, right? So you could build it.
I mean, take that advice and put together a great website where you're finding stories around your area, wherever you're quarantined or whatever, and maybe that's your demo reel in 6 months, and you show how you seized the day, when in a time when
that would be amazing.
I never thought that. I agree. I just thought that it was it'd be a really good idea. Okay, so let's move on to a couple other questions we have here. There's a few here that I think are sort of the same question, but basically this is a focus for reporters in their first jobs, maybe markets 100 and under. And obviously there's constantly a lot of concern, as we talked about, growth and getting ahead of the game, and this being a time when, the news cycle is so repetitive or maybe so somber, if you will, that it's hard to show range. So here are some of the questions. This is my first job. What should I be focusing on in the first 3 months of the job in the coronavirus pandemic?
Okay, so I would tell you that within the first 3 months, and this is whether this is a small market or a big market.
Okay.
What you want to go into is you want to understand the community and you want to build relationships in the community. Because that'll translate, that's an investment that you're probably going to do in addition to the story you get assigned every single day. Also, I would encourage people to really understand what the demographic makeup of that community is. Black versus white versus Hispanic, Asian. I would also, the socioeconomic. When I talk about diversity, I always talk about diversity is more than just nationality or just more than race, that it's all these other life experiences. So understanding that community will make, looking at the numbers, which sometimes as journalists are like, I don't want to look at the numbers, right? The census, as dense as it is, has so many stories and can help you understand and really connect to that community. If you're in a Hispanic community, for example, there's a big difference between, is it 80% Cuban or is it 80% Puerto Rican or Mexican or whatnot, right? So that also helps you understand so that you can begin pitching stories that speak directly to that community. And then once you also, what I encourage is you got to cultivate sources, your own sources. The best journalists, it doesn't matter how much technology there is, but the best people are the people that know how to create relationships. And so,
it doesn't matter what market either. I think that's great advice for people even in top 10 markets. You go to a top 10 market with great sources, you're going to be so much more valuable than, a reporter who came from a network or something.
Trust. At the end of the day, the fundamentals that build great sources are the fundamentals that build great relationships and that build trust, which at the end of the day, too, as journalists, when we stand in front of a camera, what we are is asking a community to trust us, right?
Absolutely.
I think there is not a better example that I can think of in general market, and you don't need to be from that community, by the way, which is often a myth. David Bernard in Puerto Rico, who was not in Puerto Rico, CBS reporter, went down there, and all of a sudden you start getting some traction. People start calling you first for stories. But the first thing you got to do is, they always say that the best networkers are people who don't approach a relationship. Everybody thinks about networking. They think like, oh, it's so icky. I want to get something in return from you. Actually, I learned later in life that the best networkers are actually the people who approach, how can I help you? First. Then the universe has a way of sort of making everything balance. You get it some back. It comes back to you somehow. But that would be my advice, is to yes, you have to do a great job in those day-to-day stories, but invest every single other moment learning your data and your demographics of your community, as well as going out there and create and go to events, go to meetings,
Yeah.
if you have an attitude of 9 to 5, you're in the wrong business.
Agree.
I
couldn't agree more. It's such good advice for everybody. Coming off of that, what would you say? I mean, I think you made a good point. A reporter who has good sources is going to stand out, period. And I think that there's a lot of misconception that maybe it's, for females at the very least, it's like the hairdo, the look, right? There's all this pressure on that. And I always, when I coach folks, I'm always like, well, what's your substance? Like, how many layers do you have if we peel this all back? So what would you say makes a reporter stand out?
I mean, to me, and I'm not saying that, I think sources, relationships. I think also a level of sensitivity where I always say that, or there's a saying, it's not just me, that says that, anybody, that anybody could, a good journalist can make even out of a shoe a good story.
Yeah, of course.
There aren't bad stories, there's bad journalists, right? Or bad storytellers. So I think that what really, really stands out, and this sometimes comes more with experience, but I think that if you invest and you're a student of life, and you read a lot and you look at the psychology of communication, for example, and what connects with people, the biggest mistake that I think young journalists make is that they want to sound so intelligent they're not human. They're not related. One of my most talented journalists is a very, very smart guy who is, well, you would probably say is an intellect. But when he does his stories, he takes these really, like, you're talking about budgets and, like complex stuff, and he makes it so easy to understand. That he is so secure in his own shoes to take this complex ideas, understand them in a way that he can like flip-flop them up and down or whatever, and still give it up to you in a way that you can totally, completely understand. But that's not because he's simplifying. It's not because he's simple. It's because he's simplifying it, because he's more interested in communicating the message and that the audience understands it, than in him being like, oh, look at me, I'm so smart.
Right. I think that there's a level of, we have this pressure to feel credible, but credibility, like you said, I mean, is all in, I trust this person to tell me something in a way that I can kind of understand. And I think for a lot of young people, credibility is speaking in a certain tone or doing something in a way that maybe feels very textbook. And I don't think that's really the case at all.
No, when you look at this generation right now, I will tell you, is not just the ones that are graduating, but like millennials, for example, they're not looking. There is studies that will tell you if somebody walks in and they're like, and I think this is different from at least my generation. Like the person who walked in and he was in a suit and he was tall and he fit the perfect person, image of CEO.
Yeah, like anchor or whatever, right?
Both very with these really eloquent words. There's actually proof that people don't trust them, and so. Imagine if you're using that type of language that is, press release language or government language that nobody can relate to. It's actually, you're losing out on the number one thing you need to have, which is trust.
Agree.
We say corporate BS. When you do too much corporate BS, people are like, the same thing goes for news anchors. Like we no longer give the news the way Ron Burgundy did, right? Like,
right, of course. I think it's hard to be so vulnerable on TV though, and I think that's a conversation for another time, but being a reporter, like just being yourself feels like wrong almost sometimes, but I think we're now in a place and a time where we're embracing that, which I think is good for young people.
Oh yeah, the vulnerability. I mean, and I can just imagine that as I get older and then I realize that I don't know much, that's to feel more comfortable realizing that you can be more vulnerable and say, I don't know. When you're early in your career, you're like, I can't say I don't know because they think that they hired the wrong person, right? I think that and sort of that exposing of simplifying stuff. That's why I said the example I gave was somebody very high and intellectual who was bringing as opposed to somebody who's not that intellectual trying to bring it up.
Yeah.
You want to, that's where you create a divide with the audience. So
I
to me,
agree.
that stands out.
So what should somebody have mastered after their first job? What would you say?
I think you have to have major mistakes
Mm-hmm.
and learn from them quick.
Yeah.
The flexibility to, and turnaround time is really important.
Like
And sort of,
deadlines, you mean, quickly, like being able to turn packages quickly?
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely that. And then I think you want to have sort of a format and a template for when you go to another market, how you build out, how do I learn the market? How do I build my sources quickly? I would definitely have a sort of template or plan that I could accelerate that growth
Yeah.
for myself and transfer it to other markets.
I love what you had to say about that, just to reiterate. I mean, it is a business, and I don't think young people realize that early enough that, you know, if you're telling stories about strawberries and you don't live in a town where there's a strawberry farm, I don't know, I'm making a ridiculous, you know, like analogy,
Right.
because I'm in Florida, but if it doesn't apply, then nobody's going to watch, right? It's like that connectivity, and I just love that message. So thank you for saying that. The census is such a good idea. Thank you so much for joining us. I will say, do you have any other thoughts, comments for the young journalists at NAHJ or who are planning to come to the conference this summer but maybe can, or just words of encouragement right now?
And I just think the number one thing is, and it's not just now, I think if you find your purpose and you do that sort of self-awareness and self-reflection, and then you choose a job or you choose a career along those lines, you're never going to have a job. It's never going to be a job. You're going to love what you do no matter what. And the world, like I said, the world has a way to like balance things out. When you're doing what you were you were brought to this earth to do, and that sense of purpose, everything else sort of somehow falls in place. So that's my advice.